The American Federation dollar. This is the first new asset-backed currency established by our country in over 150 years. Our silver, nickel, and copper coinage also remain in circulation together with outstanding certificates and bonds backed by precious metals, land, and other assets. BRICS. U.S. economist anticipates bankruptcy and market crash. As the BRICS predicts the gloom and doom of the worthless USD and Federal Reserve Note FRN, U.S. bankruptcy and market crash. The global family group resonates in harmony with creation and the United States of America unincorporated officially announcing on April 5, 2024. As we have returned from over the sea, where our treasonous employees deposited us by registering us as federal dual citizens, thus impersonating average Americans, and then arbitrarily declaring us to be enemies in an illegal mercenary conflict, all under color of law, and for the profit and advantage of third-party principals. We have taken stock of their actions as our purported trustees and custodians, brought them to trial, and found them severely lacking. They have been convicted of gross breach of trust and violation of their service contracts, the federal constitutions, and have been officially standing in criminal dereliction and evasion of their actual contractual obligations as service vendors since April of 2014. They and their minions have been assessed an initial estimated $279 trillion. Page of $7 in gold as damages under our cured commercial liens, and billions of dollars in precious metals bonds have been returned to Global Family Bank, a prosperity institution that is serving as our Federation Treasury. We declare that the actual Americans are the holders of the only survivorship interest in all the associated, waived, and constructive missing person estates named after us. We have employed our unincorporated Federation of States, doing business as the United States of America since 1776, which is in receipt of the delegated powers returned to it by both the original Confederation and the Federal Republic, to issue a new international currency for the Union States doing business as the United States and for purposes of international trade worldwide. Our new international currency, the American Federation dollar, AFD, defined as 1/10 ounce of 99.9% pure gold, trades at a rate of 1 AFD per 180 United States dollars, or when converted to domestic use, 180 FRNs. As other currencies are currently being rigged by manipulation of currency supplies and availability, and as both gold and silver values are also being rigged, the exchange rates are both volatile and subject to change but will be pegged against the prevailing markets and published rates worldwide on a daily basis. This is the first new asset-backed currency established by our country in over 150 years. Our silver, nickel, and copper coinage also remain in circulation together with outstanding certificates and bonds backed by precious metals, land, and other assets. While our silver and gold reserves have been assiduously collected and transferred overseas, for safekeeping, in the Philippines and in the world's central banks by these same erring principals and contractors, we have been charged. Page of 7. Without our knowledge or consent, for their expenses carrying out innumerable foreign mercenary conflicts, in our names, and under our war flag. Naturally, we, Americans, have been blamed for all this warmongering, but our contracts with these vendors, both the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution of the United States, do not allow for any such extraterritorial activities, and it is clearly stipulated that our armed forces exist to defend this country and its people, not to wage war for profit on others. Those banks which have extended our credit to these foreign corporations for illicit and unauthorized purposes had cause to know better, and the members of the Bar Temple and its various courts have similarly had cause to know better than to engage in crimes of personage and barratry under pretense of war, whereupon we have placed substantive liens upon them and upon our assets that have been unlawfully, illegally, and immorally cashiered as abandoned and otherwise compromised assets. Additional efforts are underway to secure cured bond receipts that were issued in the names of individual Americans as part of the issuance of foreign birth certificates and so-called Social Security cards, which are bonds which are issued every 10 years throughout the lifetimes of the victims, but are not returned as receipts to the individual accounts, as they legally should be, but are instead arbitrarily dispensed by unelected bureaucrats and regularly drained by elected officials who illegally and immorally added individual Social Security receipts to their own corporate general fund on the deliberately false presumption that the funds belong to absent municipal corporation franchisees. These repugnant legal schemes have not even met the basic requirement for legalization, which requires fair notice and unobstructed access to remedy and exemption, clearly advertised and provided. The perpetrators have attempted to justify their acts as exigencies of war, but when examined, it turns out that there is no actual war, only repeated illegal. Page of 7. Mercenary conflicts ever since the so-called American Civil War, and which are not owed any dignity under the law of war. All banks, including the central banks and securities brokers, are under demand to account for our assets, deposited with them by our erstwhile employees, and to return our assets to our control without further obfuscation or excuse. The activities of the territorial and municipal congressional bodies and the chief executives of these foreign corporations operating in the District of Columbia, and, please note, now deceptively attempting to continue operations as the American Government, Incorporated, need to be recognized for what they are and prevented from making any more false claims against us, our assets, and our credit. They are also under demand by the presumed donors of all these trusts to yield back our purloined property assets to our control and to shut down this ugly system immediately. Safekeeping receipts and other records for all physical assets belonging to America and to Americans impacted by this fraud scheme should be forwarded to our fiduciary office in care of Global Family Bank and, as appropriate, reissued in the name of the individual trust and the United States of America unincorporated. This includes all assets deposited by Severino Santa Romano for the Avila, sometimes Diavila, Family Trust, the V.K. Durham Trust, the St. Germain Trust, the Urban Trust, individual so-called Legacy Trust, and Historical Trust accounts, illicit deposits certificated by or through Seed and Company, the DTC, DTTC, and similar international clearinghouses having American origins, gold deposited in the Philippines by the U.S. Navy, gold deposited in the Philippines and elsewhere by hired professional precious metals depositors, and all securities, stocks and bonds held in the names of individual American named estates and fictional public trusts. Page of 7. The principals and parties, including the Holy See, the City of Rome, the City of Westminster, the Lord Mayor of the Inner City of London, the Roman Curia, Committee of 300, Global Federal Reserve, British Crown Corporation, World Bank, the British Monarch, International Monetary Fund, and others who are responsible for purloining American assets in breach of trust and contract, and for receiving these assets as deposits, should be ashamed and held up as examples of what bad faith really means. We have established our new gold-backed currency and chartered and authorized the Global Family Bank to issue it, and also established our international treasury, not to be confused with the Treasury run by the IMF for the USA, Inc. or by the United States Department of the Treasury, or any other service or function of our erstwhile federal employees. We consider both the Federal Reserve and the IMF to be criminal organizations engaged in fraud and theft, money laundering, peonage and enslavement rackets, obstruction of trade and commerce, personage crimes and human trafficking, taxation, and securities fraud. This is good and proper notice to the Bank for International Settlements, the International Monetary Fund, and other interested banks and governmental and international bodies, that these issues exist, that our assets have been purloined and we have been misrepresented and exploited by white-collar criminals functioning as inland pirates for purposes of fraud and unjust enrichment. The chief aim of these same criminals operating administratively as Serco and privately as the British Pilgrims Society, has been to annex not only the United States, but all former Commonwealth countries, 17 illegally occupied countries in Western Europe, Japan, South Korea, Iraq, Libya, and diverse other countries and nations, for the benefit of their own commercial operations and coercive political power. They have been using our assets, including our labor, as the basis of their Page of 7. Worldwide commercial terrorism, and they could not do this without the support and cooperation of the banks which have colluded with them all along. These same banks have cause to know that the gold on deposit with them comes from private sources, and also have cause to be aware of the birth certificate fraud, the Philippines, safekeeping fraud, and the securitization of living flesh fraud. Every single one of the parties addressed by this email and published notice have cause to know that the Federal Reserve note is tainted by peonage and securities fraud and is essentially worthless, and that the USD, aka the petrodollar, is tainted by enslavement and securities fraud and collusive monopoly practices in obstruction of both trade and commerce. This situation can only continue with the cooperation and liability of the banks, securities brokerages, insurance providers, and legal firms, and they therefore accrue the full commercial liability, and their officers accrue the personal liability for these continued crimes against humanity. All those who are done with the British Romano caste system, done with fraud and malice as a way to make a living, and done with perpetual war as a way to make a profit, are invited to join us and put an end to this evil and these abundant crimes against the most innocent and vulnerable among us, our babies in their cradles. Notice to principals is notice to agents. Notice to agents is notice to principals. Issued by Anna Maria Riesinger, fiduciary. Page of 7. The United States of America in care of Box 520,994 Big Lake, Alaska, 99652.
All right. American Federation dollar. If anybody have anything, leave your comments. Any question, have any questions or anything like that, leave it in the comments. I can get a lot of this information to you. All we have to do is just communicate and just go from there. Like I said, I'm just here to share information and spread the news. God bless.